wanted to introduce you to someone who I was lucky enough to meet in the first 2 weeks of our time together at Wharton, and who remains a great friend to this day. He has an amazing and sobering story to tell us all. Please welcome Craig Gile.
Thank you, Mr. Mady. So one thing I was hoping to get out of last night's Warnout Walk was a raspy, sexy voice, so hopefully I did get that. So let me take you back to early 2004. I have a pretty idyllic life. I don't mean to brag or anything, but I got a master's in business, the Wharton School of Business. If you can all attest, it's super genius stuff. So, and prior to that, I had been naval aviator, was a decorated war veteran. Here's a picture of me and my stone cold killer warrior buddies on the aircraft carrier. Some of you all may have known my friend Maureen when we were here. You probably knew her as being a sweet and fun person. She is more sweet and more fun now than she was then. We had 3 happening young, rambunctious boys, Carter, Garrett, and Ian. I was active in the community, coaching all sorts of sports. I was on the board of the town association. I was working at a homeless shelter. The career was going fine. I was managing director and ran a commodity derivatives desk for Citigroup. And as part of that job, I shared a portfolio. A partner of mine had built up the business over a matter of years, and it became a pretty large, complex book of commodity derivatives. So that'll be important to the story, the sharing a book thing, just so you know. So near the end of 2003, we get an alert that there's a risk issue with the book. So as it happens, the bank system did not handle commodities or the complex derivatives we had very well. So I didn't think that much about it. But so given this risk issue, I took a couple-day project, and I went in and scrubbed the entire book and tried to figure out what was right, what was wrong. Ended up marking down a bunch of trades. And I'm thinking, okay, so it's December, no harm, no foul. It's not going to affect anybody's, the bank's books and records or bonus or anything. So I figured I'd fix it, and we, solve the problem going forward and move on. So kind of as a function of an unfortunate series of events after that, there's an allegation that the book has been overvalued at year end. Essentially, my boss went in after I thought that I'd fixed the book and kind of, we'll say, readjusted some things, and arguably they were overinflated. So that, from that, there's an unfortunate series of events where basically the bank's hands got kind of tied as to how they could deal with it. Basically got into a whistleblower situation. I won't get into that. But so ultimately, it's post-Enron, it's commodities. So the bank, like I said, their hands are fairly tied, and so they fire myself and my boss. So that's obviously not a great thing, but I get a job at a hedge fund right away, move on, not thinking too much about it. So after that happens, the U.S. government gets wind of it on it's called a suspicious activity report, which is just a routine thing the bank sends out. So the prosecutors take up this case. I'm not really thinking, I'm surprised when I kind of heard about it. Again, the bank was the presumed victim of this, we'll call it a scheme, and they had no interest in the government pursuing this. It was bad PR for them, and frankly, they thought they'd resolve the whole issue by having to fire us. But anyway, so the feds get involved with it, and they go back and forth with my lawyers for a little bit. During this process, I never really get a chance to give my side of the story, but this is the way that it works out. So ultimately, as they go through that, they end up charging me with defrauding the bank. In their view, I was overpaid $180,000 by virtue of the overvalued book. So kind of rocked, my world a little bit. So once they charge me, basically I have 2 choices. I can fight this, take it to trial, or they offer me a plea. The plea would have been 1 year, and they kind of give me a carrot of probation. The path for taking to trial, I'm told, was going to be a 2-year process just to get to trial. Well over $1 million of an estimate it was going to cost me to try to defend myself. 5-year prison sentence if I am in fact convicted, which is frankly kind of likely, because for me to take it to trial, I'm going to have to overcome the natural assumptions that a jury, my peers, is going to have of what my motives were and what we were trying to do. Also, I have to try to explain to a jury of my peers the art of trying to value complex options based upon the implied correlation on rarely if ever traded commodities, combined with the covariance of the of spread options of Asian options. So, given that challenge, and given the fact when I'm thinking about trying to go through this process and possibly having 5 years in prison, frankly missing the entire high school career of at least my oldest son, Carter, who happens to be here, I literally got sick to my stomach with that. So we decide that it's best to take a plea and hope to get probation. So I'm making that decision when this is how old my kids are. So I'm like, that's what I'm going to have to go away for, at least for a year, if not for 5. So take the plea, and I get sent to federal prison camp, Jessup, Georgia. Not exactly a garden spot. If you ever want to go to vacation, I suggest other places, even in Georgia, as opposed to Jessup. So Jessup is no club fed. It is basically like a rural elementary school, cinder block facility, house 160 men, but there's no cells or there's no even walls around the compound. Frankly, I lived on an aircraft carrier for 6 months at a clip. The accommodations were way better at Jessup than they were on the boat, but it's a little bit of a different situation. So it was not a great place. It was a depressing place. But frankly, the only real hardship, per se, was basically boredom, depression, obviously being taken away from my family, sadness, humiliation. So that being said, we had remarkable support throughout the process. When I'm going through the process of sentencing, I had dozens of people write letters to the judge, ironically named Judge Sweet, who and everyone had a common theme. I'm a reasonably good guy. My one college buddy had a great line. He's like, "Oh, dude, what a deal. Like, you get to hear what people will say at your funeral and didn't even have to die." So thanks, Rudy. It's really cool. Appreciate it. So like I said, we had great support. Got through the whole process. Not surprising that Maureen was a rock of support. While I was in Jessup, she juggled a calendar of having someone visit me every single weekend that I was there. I had 24 people come from far and wide to, pardon the expression, bumfuck Georgia, to come visit me. Hundreds of different people, or 100 plus people wrote me letters. So I had great support. But getting out of that, even with the great support that I had, figuring out life, post this prison experience, it's not that easy. And people have an impression like, oh, if you're a white-collar criminal, it's kind of a bump in the road. Not everyone is Martha Stewart. Not everyone can have a show with Snoop Dogg because they went to prison. So, it's obviously has drastically impacted my career, impacted our life. But so, I've learned a lot of things through this whole process, to be frank. But one thing I've learned to take from it is there's nuanced situations. So I'm sure even people that knew me, when they heard about that I pled guilty to this, this crime, that, Craig, I'm sure he made a mistake and got his hand caught in the proverbial cookie jar. Too bad for Craig. The reality was I was in, trying to navigate a really complex situation, and just got stuck where I really had no path to fight it, get out of it. And so, the narrative is like I, wanted to defraud the bank and increase my bonus by $180,000. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, I was a trader. I understand reward and risk. Why would I screw up this idyllic life that we had for something stupid like that? Plus, I don't really care that much about money. It's a ridiculous notion. But anyway, so that's kind of the narrative that people would assume that I was going to do. But so, that's not the reality. So one thing I take from this is when I hear stories in the press of some saga or controversy, or I have friends who have, gossip in the neighborhood, I've come to learn that, everything's not black and white, and there's a fair amount of gray in pretty much all situations. So that's my takeaway from this. Like, don't fall into the trap of making the natural assumptions that you're obviously meant to make a lot of times. So a couple things for y'all. Unfortunately, I will not be at the dinner tonight. We have the college graduation for that one. And so I really appreciate your time and all the support everyone has given me through this whole process. You guys have a great reunion, and thanks for the time.